Apologies everybody for the late start. Having some technical problems, but we will start now. Very quickly go through. Welcome all councillors, officers, members of the public to the meeting of the SNR committee. Reminder, please switch your mobile phones to silent. There are members of the press attending this meeting virtually. Can I ask those attending virtually to switch off your microphone to avoid any disruption during the meeting? This meeting is being recorded and will be available in due course on the council's YouTube channel. Reminder for councillors, to ensure those attending virtually can hear everything, please make sure you project your voice and speak clearly. Please remember it's formal meetings, so therefore do not address councillors or officers by their first names. No fire alarm planned, so if you hear it, move to the nearest marked fire exit and assemble car park. And of course, be aware of contents displayed on your iPad or laptop may be seen by others. So close down screens which are displaying confidential information during the public part of meetings. Thank you. And we'll move swiftly in. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Received apologies on Councillor Hunt and Councillor Milton is joining the meeting remotely, Chair.
Thank you. Any other apologies?
Councillor Bell has sent those apologies.
Thank you. Next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of July. Let's not reading the previous minutes, which I messed up there. Any comments on those minutes of the 11th of August? Councillor Petrinos. Moved by Councillor Petrinos, seconded by Councillor Knight. All those in favour of the minutes? Thank you. Item 3, there are no items brought forward.
Just to note, I'm not sure I attended that meeting, so I would have abstained.
Okay, that's one abstention. We'll move on to item 4 because there's nothing on item 3. Any declarations of interest?
I've received none, Chair.
Okay, item 5, to agree the agenda between part A and part B. There is part B, so are we okay in having item 13 in part B? All those in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 6, local government reorganisation. Ken?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure what more I can update on really, because we had the full council on Wednesday. But just to sort of paraphrase what happened there, I guess, members decided that they wish to support the 145 option, but also to carry on exploring the Northern Devon options. And there were 2 outlined in the paperwork, if members recall correctly. And that's that'll just be carrying on along that process now. We do need to sit down and have a conversation about how we progress the Northern Devon options, especially in the light of the email that you received from the leader of Torridge, which raised some doubts as to whether Torridge would be contributing towards the work that would be necessary as part of that. But that's about where we are, Chair. I haven't really got anything extra over and above what was discussed on Wednesday, really. Oh, the only other thing to mention is that the long-awaited Newton data is now in the data bank, and all the authorities are now looking at that data to see how it affects things. I've got a meeting tomorrow morning. Sarah attended a meeting on Thursday for me, and I've got another meeting tomorrow morning where that data is discussed. But that's about it, I think, Chair, unless there are any questions.
Any questions, Councillor Knight, Ricky Knight?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The email, Ken, that you said, was that received by the senior management team or all councillors? Because I haven't seen it.
No, there was an email that was sent that was referenced at full council by the leader. It was an email sent to the leader by the leader of Torridge District Council, which indicated that although it's just his personal view at the moment, I can't remember the wording, but he couldn't see the benefit in the Northern Devon option and was looking to go to his group leaders to see whether there was agreement across the board that they concentrate on the 145 only.
Thank you, Chair. I remember.
As an update to that as well, I mean, I'm reluctant to sort of say what Torridge are doing, but I do know that they did have a group leaders meeting. And I know they have decided to have a full council meeting, I think on the 22nd of September. There's no indication any money will be forthcoming to support any northern action. You know, 22nd of September is still quite a long way away. It's and so I'm not too certain what will happen at that meeting. I wouldn't want to preempt anything, but there've not been any commitment to make to money to North Devon to fund anything. So that's where we are at the moment. It's a very difficult one. As I said last week, personally, I am against spending up to 150,000 ourselves on that, and we'll have to speak with the other group leaders and see where what we can do and where we are going. But I'd rather spend it on other things. But still progress, you know, and look at possible ideas for a northern option and see what other authorities are coming up with. I think that's what one avenue we can do. But yeah, I mean, I'm open to any ideas, any comments, any. Councillor Craft, sorry.
Yeah, more of a strategic thing, really. I mean, the whole driver for this, if you look at the national paperwork, is that it's supposed to save 2.9 billion, which is roughly about 120 quid per house, per community, or, you know, per dwelling, per family or whatever. But that was based on work that was done by the county council network, who assumed that all 21 county councils would become the unitary. If I think there's a proposal, if you add up all the proposals for what's going around now, there's something like 58 new councils going to be formed. And if that's happening, it's going to be nearly 100 paying the other way. So I think if we all, well, there we are. I mean, you've got your own visions and your own ideas, but I can't see that it makes sense with such like children's services and things like that to split it up into little things. I don't see how it's affordable, but there we are. I mean, I'm just making a point, just commenting, that's all. You know, it's not nothing we can answer.
Yeah,
I just want to reiterate something I said last week when we had the council meeting, is that the evidence from KPMG is that the size issue, the population issue, is not the determining factor, because they've done a lot of work in Cumbria that have got obviously a solution that's now working with 2 unitaries. And I think the evidence that they were presenting was saying that there is no evidence that the size makes any difference to the delivery of services. I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think, you know, what the government has said is that the drive behind this is twofold. One is to reduce costs, but there appears to be quite a lot of research that shows that those places which have become unitaries already have not made cost savings. And if they are, it's you know, long time into the future. So the basis for the decision of government is questionable, but that's outside our power. As indeed is virtually everything in this, because government will decide what government is going to do. So when it comes to thinking about how best to serve people in North Devon, and I suppose more broadly, because we have to consider things from a county-wide perspective, it seems to me that the amount of money which councils are going to have to spend, whether we end up with 1 unitary, 2 unitaries, 3, 4, however many government decides, actually that's money that government is going to force us to spend, which we ought to be spending, frankly, on serving the people of our communities. I think what's really clear is that government is not looking at this, I think, from a what works best in local communities, particularly in a rural perspective, and that we can only do the best that we can do for our people. I personally am against spending the 150,000 on anything, and I thought that's kind of what was quite a lot of people on Wednesday at the full council meeting talking about. There are many other things that we can and should be spending our money on government's certainly not going to be going with a small unitary where other councils appear not to be behind it. It just seems a bit mad to me.
Yes, thanks. This is about the fourth round over the last 30 odd years of unitarisation of local government. And every time it comes up under governments of whatever type, it's always partially justified on the fact that it's going to save money, and it never seems to, ever, over the last 30 odd years. It's almost as if national politicians feel they need to tick off the pound sign argument as part of their justification for doing something they want to do anyway. And I think that's what's happening this time as well. But what also seems clear is that the unitaries that work more accurately reflect their local communities. I mean, the one that Councillor Travers mentioned in Cumbria, they're about $250,000 each, you know, the two authorities there, and they work perfectly well. They get far better point services than a good council like Devon does. So the idea of size isn't the determinant in being able to provide effective services. The idea of having an authority that meets the community's needs is, and that's what we need to do. So I think that if we need to spend £150,000, then so be it, because when else are we going to have a chance to try and influence a decision like this? Because as Councillor Lever said, the amount of decision-making power we have is virtually zilch. What we can do, the only thing we can do, is give another option for government to choose between, and we can only come up with one. So I think what we need to do is try and focus on the best one for the people of Northern Devon and come up with that so that the government at least have a chance to pick it, rather than just having to pick somebody else's.
Ken, do you want to come back on things?
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair, if I may. Councillor Crabb is absolutely right that the savings that government were looking to make from local government reorganisation were based or seem to be based entirely on the County Council's network reports, which indicated that going over to a single tier of government with a unitary authority encompassing the whole county in each area would make savings. That hasn't happened in some areas, and as Councillor Lever said, you know, the reports are now coming through which indicate that no savings have been made, and that's probably unsurprising because the funding model in local government is shifting all the time anyway. So, you know, whether you make savings really depends on how much money you're getting from government, and if that's moving, then you're not comparing apples with apples at any one time. But just in relation to, I can't remember who said it now, but somebody said about the chances of success of a option that isn't gaining the support of other councils. It is correct to say that you don't need to have the support of other councils in order to put a proposal together, but government will be looking for support, I am sure, as part of the evaluation criteria. And one of the strengths of the 145 model that we have identified is that it does gain the support of 8 authorities. So, you know, that is certainly in its favour. And I have to say, you know, submitting a model which doesn't secure any other support other than one authority will probably go against that proposal. But, you know, how it's evaluated by government, I don't know. Government has set out 6 criteria, and the first 3 of those look as if they're more treasury led, and the second 3 look as if they're more sort of MHCRG communities led. So how they'll be assessed finally, I don't really know. But Councillor Petrinos is right. We can only support one option ultimately, but you know, members at full council decided to keep their options open for the time being, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. We just need to work out how we move forward with the Northern Devon option if we are funding it by ourselves, because you know, I haven't got the exact figures, but the 150k that's being bandied around is based on some of the figures that KPMG have produced. It might be cheaper, it might be more than that, but ultimately, you know, we have to realise that we don't have a spare 150,000 knocking around. So we will need to have a discussion about how we fund that and how we move forward. But we can do that informally amongst group leaders, I think, initially anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? Councillor Lever?
Sorry, just to come back again. I think for me, what's really clear is that, you know, up here in the north of the county, we are different from the rest of the county. We are special, we are distinctive. And actually, my red lines and red lines I've heard other people talking about is that whatever outcome we end up with, we should be making sure that we have a strong argument for keeping Torridge and North Devon together. And I think the placemaking story is very much part of that. The other thing that I would say is that given the guidelines that government set out in the white paper in December last year, in terms of size of authority, they said between 300 and 500,000. That excludes a super giant Devon, which could well include Torbay as well. So just going, if they stick to what the white paper criteria were and clarification since, the likelihood is that we will not have a giant Devon. I would support there not being a giant Devon. I don't think it would serve us well, as I don't think county has served us well.
Going to move on. Yeah, this big debate last Wednesday.
Carry on.
So there's nothing else we'll note what the chief exec has had to say. I'll move on to item 7, which I think is John.
Thank you, Jeff. Members, item 7 is the report that came from the LGA governance review. You'll recall that earlier this year, the Government Association undertook a governance review with specific focus on the overview and scrutiny function of the council. This report updates you on the recommendations from that report. The full report can be found in your Appendix A, pages 19 to 29. This report went to the policy development meeting back in June 2025. The committee discussed the action plan that was contained within that report, and the resolutions are also contained within this update for you this morning. The review that was carried out by the LGA covered 3 themes: reviewing the effectiveness of the Policy Development Committee, the potential for more formal scrutiny arrangements, and also looking at the overall governance effectiveness of the council. In terms of the first theme around the effectiveness of the Policy Development Committee, the report referenced the excellent work that was carried out by the current Policy Development Committee, specifically the areas that were focused on, such as dental provision, water quality and agriculture. However, it did reference that councillors on that committee felt unable to comment on reports that had previously been presented to this committee, Strategy and Resources, and then went on to Policy Development. The second theme looked at that same area around reviewing reports at Policy Development Committee after they'd been signed off by SNR. Didn't present the opportunity for that level of scrutiny that was felt was being asked for by that committee. Working groups are a feature of scrutiny and are usually used to deep dive into specific topics. However, the majority of working groups, it was reported, come back here to Strategy and Resources Committee, not Policy Development. The third theme looks at the overall governance in the authority, and it was pleasing to report that they felt we had good governance in place and strong in a number of those areas. The review of the risk register, though, is carried out by the Governance Committee and doesn't come through Policy Development. So we do have good governance, but it is carried out in a number of different areas of the council. And also it touched on a work programme. So some committees have a work programme, such as Policy Development and Governance, but there was no work programme for this committee, Strategy and Resources. So the report came up with a number of recommendations, and they're addressed in your report, on this report, unupdated, on pages 16 and 17, item 4.5. I'm assuming you read those, so I won't go into those in detail. A draft action plan with proposed implementation timescales was then presented to Policy Development Committee in June, and that is set out in Appendix B with a copy of the minutes. In terms of the resolutions from that committee in June, it resolved 2 timelines: one to implement a number of changes by September, and a couple to be implemented by next April 2026. namely that the committee be changed from its existing Policy Development Committee to become a new Scrutiny and Policy Development Committee. That the Strategy and Resources Committee have a standing item on their agenda for a work programme. Quarterly meetings be held between all of the chairs, between Strategy and Resources, the Scrutiny and Policy Development Committee and the Governance Committee, to review and coordinate their work programmes to make sure that they are aligned. That each of those committees produce an annual effectiveness report to the full council. That the current quarterly performance and financial reports be separated, which you'll note from your last meeting, they came as separate items on your agenda, and then presented prior to this committee coming to Scrutiny and Policy Development first. That the terms of reference for both Strategy and Resources and Scrutiny and Policy Development be developed and clarified. That working groups be established to look at specific policy areas and to report into Policy Development and Scrutiny Committee prior to then coming to this meeting at Strategy and Resources. That lead members will report to the Scrutiny and Policy Development Committee in line with their agreed work programme, and that further training be delivered to members focusing on the key committee reports, such as the performance and financial management quarterly reports. And then changes to be implemented from April 26 around members of Strategy and Resources Committee not sitting on Scrutiny and Policy Development or Governance Committee, and that the committee timetable for 26-27 be reviewed to allow certain reports, such as the performance report, to come to Scrutiny and Policy Development first, prior to them making recommendations to then come to this report, to this meeting at Strategy and Resources Committee. So those resolutions that came out of Policy Development are shown in your pages 34 and 35. Those agreed actions do result in some minor constitutional amendments and also changes to the committee timetable. Those constitutional amendments will come through to Governance Committee and full council this month in September, and the proposed committee timetable changes in terms of reports going to Policy Development and then to Strategy and Resources will come alongside your normal timetable that comes for April 2026. So, Chair, that gives you a summary of the outcomes that went to Policy Development. The recommendations are on page 15, 2.1 and 2.2 in terms of noting the LGA feedback report and the recommendations that were set out in Appendix A, and that you're noting the discussions held at Policy Development and the resolutions that were agreed for implementation by that committee. Please take any questions.
Thank you, John. Before I do that, I mean, one of the reasons, or the reason why I asked for this governance review to come in was because I didn't feel that the scrutiny aspect in North Devon Council was perhaps as strong as it could be, and that was the sole reason for this. I think other things will come out of it as well, but I hope that this will lead to more effective governance. Not saying it was weak before, but I think having good, effective scrutiny is always good for a council, whether you're in control or not in control. So I'm hoping that will lead to better performances all round. It will perhaps be a bit fuzzy at the edges sometimes, and I think there is an issue still with lead members. I mean, we introduced a system of lead members producing reports for full council, and this is probably part of my fault as well. In that the last one, it got lost because I'd forgotten it was going to go to policy from now on. I think we need to perhaps think clearly about what we want. It does talk about lead members as well and changing the rules somewhat, but I don't know whether we've come to a conclusion on this and aligning lead members with our strategic objectives. And I don't think we've done that as yet. And that's something I don't know what the plan is on that, John, or whether who that would go to, whether it would emanate from policy committee or come from here, suggestions, and collected by Adam, perhaps. I don't know. But those are things to think about while opening up to anybody who wants to ask any questions or not comments. Councillor Petrinos and Councillor Lee.
Yeah, the reason I asked for it to come to this committee was because even though it had been to council and policy, it clearly has some implications for the operation of our committee here. So I think it's only reasonable, therefore, that the SNR also get to see the report and get to discuss the things such as you just described. But as it stands, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Before we move it, Councillor Lee, were you going to move them as well, or do you want to?
And also, I'll second. I think I'd actually quite like to extend our thanks to the team from the LGA who came and worked with us on this, because clearly the good governance that we've got, and I have to say, having moved from originally when I was a councillor having a cabinet system to a new system where we have committees and actually councillors are far more able to be involved and to make a difference to things is a good thing. But it is always worth reviewing these things to see how they can be further improved. And as you say, David, so Councillor Clayton, you know, good strong scrutiny is a hallmark of a good council, and we wish to be the best council. I think we are actually the best council in Devon, but I'm biased. I suppose the only other thing that I would say is with regard to lead members. I think that the work of lead members, just from experience, I would suggest that some are considerably more involved with things than others, and that there is an SRA involved, and actually we as a council have to ensure that money that is spent on an SRA and using the experience and expertise of lead members is money well spent. And that, so I would agree with you that I think that we should be looking more at that and making sure there is accountability there. And that golden policy, that golden thread of policy throughout and strategic aims must be there. It absolutely must be there. But having said that, I'd like to second the motion.
Or do you, Councillor Lee, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, in the middle of all this, that's, you know, this is sort of changes to the way that committee does things. But I mean, I don't, and I've left the committee now, and I must say it was one of the most enjoyable and engaging committees that I've been on in North Devon. But let's not forget that one of the things that came out of the LGA visit was their support for the external scrutiny work that the committee's done in the past in terms of dentistry, agriculture, water quality, and one of the LGA members said that was something they were going to take back to their authority and to try and introduce in their authority. And I think that I've said it before, but I think that the old policy development committee has done an absolutely fantastic job there, and I hope that they continue to do so.
This talk of governance reviews just reminded me actually, because Kit came to see me just before the meeting to remind everybody, and of course I then forgot, that we've got another governance peer review coming up, thank you, in October, and she sent out an email to all councillors asking you asking you to reply to a certain date. So just a reminder really, please, to anybody who's not, if they could reply to Kit. John?
So obviously this was the governance review that you had carried out. So the one in October is a wider peer review on the whole council. So obviously this sets the governance foundations that will obviously feed into that. The one in October is obviously the wider peer review that we had a few years ago. As members, some members will recall. So as you said, there is an email that's gone out to councillors as well around dates. So this obviously feeds into that, and I'm sure they'll be pleased to note that a number of the things that sets out in this report have obviously been taken on board and obviously are being implemented moving forwards.
Yeah, and I'm sure they will pick up on this, perhaps learn feeling about lead members. And I think it would be useful if they could send something out to all lead members, clearly indicating where we are with their portfolio and what is expected of them. Can that be done? Something, and who would send that out?
Yeah, I think probably we need a separate conversation with yourself and the group leaders and with Ken, and then we'll get something out to the members. Yeah,
and it is a blurred feeling there. They'll pick up on this, so rightly so as well.
Useful to get some clarity in advance of that peer review taking place, especially following on from what we've agreed here as part of these report actions.
Yeah. Yes. Councillor Trevor, then we'll move to
10-second question. Do we know this system that we operate on is frowned upon by government? Is there any timetable to remove it? Do we know?
This came up last week. I mean, at the moment, I can't see them doing anything before LGA goes through. I just cannot see that.
No.
Might be grizzly wrong there, but I just cannot see them changing it. That's what they've said. They want to change away from the committee system, but I'm sure it will not happen to North Devon Council. And there's certainly no push for it politically at the moment from us here. But no, we'll have to ask the Labour government that one, Parliament, for Councillor Grant. Okay, we've had the move to the recommendations, seconded by Councillor Lever. All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. Item 8. Councillor Ricky Knight wants to have a word. Ricky, do you want to say something before the officers speak, or?
I will set that item 8 up and concentrate on item 9. If I'd like to introduce.
Sorry, I've done that wrong, haven't I?
That's okay, but I'll have some statement of that.
Right.
Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. So agenda item 8, the climate action team asked that a report be brought to this committee setting out where we could potentially install solar power on council owned buildings and to reduce our energy use and carbon footprint and save money. So that's what you've got in front of you. The property team, Che Mackenzie, secured government funding to get plans, surveys and plans done for all of our buildings. So I've summarised that for you. And as part of those energy surveys, the assessor looked at whether property was suitable for solar power or not. 9 were assessed as suitable for solar, and Mark and I, in conjunction with the climate action team, have prioritised 4 as being the ones where we've got large power usage on site, and a solar array would substantially decrease that power usage and thus save us money. And those 4 are Frinsworthy Environment Centre, Green Lanes, Barnstable Pannier Market and bus station. And just to note that we're already looking at solar at Frinsworthy as part of a wider piece of work, but this site is very complicated electrically. So it has been quite slow progress, been a bit of frustration. So I'm very happy to take questions about the paper, but basically we're asking you to note the content of the report and that we're going to get a costed proposal for solar installations at those priority properties, and that we'll come back to you before the end of 2025, which tells you the progress and also gives you those costed proposals.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Ricky Knight and Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 38 and also 41, it's I don't know about my colleagues, but I never had appreciation of just how many properties and fall to NDC. So that in itself is intriguing, and energy usage and carbon emissions are also significant and again interesting from the point of view of our portfolio. Point 4.9, it's not, there is a question coming up on page 39, 4.9. That's quite an important statement there in the second half of point 4.9, which is councillors need to be aware that an investment in renewable energy generation on some of our tenanted properties will not decrease our own energy use or reported carbon footprint, but not give cost savings to the council. That's not always appreciated by members, and so I think that's an interesting point. Question is on benign question on 4.7, Donna. What are the 2 buildings not suitable due to historic? I presume one must be the Queen's Theatre, isn't it?
No, I would say Old Town Station, because that's listed, and give me.
I do.
It's another listed building. I think it may be the museum. I'll have to check that and get back to you, but I ran them through by collect. Sorry?
More likely to be the chapel.
I don't think that was.
But it's not one of the 9.
I don't think that was identified as being suitable for solar, but I will check and I'll get back to you. I'll clarify that point. Sorry, I've forgotten. Mark and I've both been on holiday, so it might be Queen Anne Building. Sorry, John's just reminded me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but it's because they're listed. And, yeah, so.
Councillor Lever, Caroline Lever.
Thank you. Actually, my question was exactly about this issue about being listed. Is the pannier market not listed?
It is, but because the roof's got a funny shape and there's a gully in the roof. And so Colette, as our conservation officer, is very happy that we could have solar panels that wouldn't be visible from the ground and that wouldn't spoil the look of the roof. I'll get you a photo from the drone, councillor.
Yeah,
so
thank
that
you.
You can see, but there's basically it's like an M shape. And there's a valley that we can put solar panels in, and Colette's quite happy that that wouldn't alter the look of the building, because you just wouldn't be able to see it unless you're in the office.
Thank you. So just carrying on from that, then, if that's the case, and that sort of sets a precedent for members of the planning committee like me, and determining planning applications, presumably for any solar panels coming forward for listed buildings, and whether this is something which should be, whether the planning policy side of our operation should be looking at this as well, whether we are able to include a policy or whether this is just an exception for specific reasons.
My understanding that it's in line with English Heritage's conservation advice, but I'm not an expert, so I'll have to ask Colette about that, and we'll get back to you, because planning policy is not.
Clearly, I'm not an expert either, if that's what the English Heritage advises. The only other point I just wanted to make was that, you know, when going back to the idea of lead members, as we were talking about in the last item, you know, bringing forward having a lead member for climate change, certainly looking at the council estate and looking for opportunities for clean energy generation on the estate is something which we have been talking about for quite some time. I'm thrilled to bits if we are in a position now to actually be moving forward with that.
Ken, do you want to come in?
It was only on the planning policy point, Chair, and that's something that we can pick up as part of the local plan. But at the moment, the work that Colette's been doing with the team is under our current local plan policies, which, you know, do provide some exemptions where there is a discretion that can be applied by Colette and the planning policy team, where things aren't visible from the road, etc., and don't affect the fabric of the building. But for wider encouragement of solar energy, etc., then the planning policy team can pick that up as part of the local plan review.
Thank you.
Councillor Petrinos.
Yeah, the thing that struck me when I read it was that the crematorium has fewer carbon emissions than the museum. Now, is that because the museum has really high carbon emissions because it's listed, or because the crematorium is particularly efficient in some way?
It's own fuel.
I just thought I could always associate crematoriums with quite high carbon.
The actual emissions are, there's quite strict controls on you know, what comes out of the chimney.
But carbon's allowed, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, okay.
It's quite I mean, it's in the decarbonisation studies that were done, that's where you'd see why one's higher than the other. The museum has high emissions because it's got uncontrolled gallery, so it uses a lot of energy, I suppose. That's why it's higher. Why it's higher than the crown, I don't know.
It seems like. That's right.
Couple of things. First of all, I'm on the crematorium committee, and it's a modern, very efficient building. I mean, and the crematorium process is as fuel efficient as it can be. So I mean that might, you know, you've got an old listed building that hasn't got double glazing and a very modern, very fuel efficient building. Even though the processes that go on in it. The other thing was just in terms of reporting back, and you said the end of this year.
Yes.
It's still to, I mean, as long as something can come back, because obviously we want to move on with this as quickly.
Item 11 is the work programme. Do we need to think about that when we get to item 11, put it, make sure it's in?
When we spoke at previous, obviously you wanted to make sure that we didn't do slides of this, Chair, and I think we agreed that an update report would come back by the end of the calendar year, so that would need to go on the work programme. Just to temper expectations, it won't be a fully costed proposal for everything in terms of all assets, because that's quite a considerable piece of work to carry out in 4 months, but certainly for the core sites that are identified in the report, and obviously progress in terms of where we are with the other assets will be contained within that update report. But just to temper, it won't be the full blown for every asset in terms of the costed proposal, because that's quite a considerable piece of work.
Thank you. So I'm just going to add, really, I mean, the report's really sort of, it outlines where we are and our strategy, really. We've Ilfracombe Pool now has the solar panels, and that was due to the fact that we had some external funding that was secured by ourselves, and we worked with our leisure contractor. And the crematorium, as you know, is the next one, which is progressing. So we have a budget now to focus on these 4 kind of target facilities now. So the next stage for us is to get some very detailed costings worked out, and then we can come back with the costs associated with those, which will probably be quite significant. But I think, you know, we've done quite a lot of work now, just sort of baselining everything and understanding, you know, things like, you know, which ones of our buildings are the highest offenders when it comes to emissions. But we don't have teams of experts and regularly available budgets that we can just sort of sling at these buildings. So this is, we're trying to do it, I suppose, logically and taking one step at a time. But I think we are now beginning to make some significant progress. If we can get these 4 done next, that will be a big step forward for us in our missions.
Thank you very much. This is about council-owned properties. Just completely, I like to every now and again show my complete ignorance of planning issues. But when we see social media talking about things like this, one thing that always come up are, why don't we put them on council-owned car parks? And secondly, why don't we insist that every housing application that comes through, they have to have solar panels on? And I've never got an answer for this, so I don't know whether anybody can give me one today. Is it a government thing that, or have local councils got the power, if they wanted to use it, to say every new housing development that goes through planning has to have solar panels fitted? Can anybody tell me here? Can you tell me that?
Do that, but it obviously will affect the viability of development. So it's one of the things that we're talking about with the local plan review process. What environmental climate change policies do we want to see in the plan? But anything that affects the viability of the development has to be evidenced, and it has to be accepted by the planning inspectorate. So that's why it's not every council does it, but there has been a suggestion from government that they are actually going to bring that in, but they've not given a date. So but yeah, and the reason that why don't we put solar panels on all of our car parks? We could, the ones that are suitable, but I've got to be honest, it's cheaper to put solar panels on the roofs of buildings that we own than it is to put in the solar carports. They're more expensive. So I would suggest that it's better value for money for the councils if we actually put it on the buildings where we know that we're going to be using the energy, and that's a cheap thing to do. And then once we've done all of the buildings, I'd be very happy to look at the car parks for you.
Well, thank you for answering that question. It doesn't make me look too stupid. Any other questions? Okay, to remove the recommendations, please.
And second,
Seconded by Councillor Lever, all in favour? Thank you. Item 9, and this is where Councillor Ricky Knight wants to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will introduce this because Councillor Caroline Williams' comments were apposite insofar as I'm the lead member of the Climate and Biodiversity, and it also now is completely relevant with regard the first item this morning in terms of maybe this report, which is basically the amount of input from the climate action team, which I chair, has put into this. And this is about the third time we looked at it and analysed it and added to it. This could well be the sort of report that goes from a working group that goes in future to policy, which is a good positive move, in my opinion. Let's see how it evolves. Okay, I'm proudly associated with this report. I keep saying this is a sort of sycophantic intro. I stand on the shoulders of giants, you know. Donna Sibley is. We were asked. I remember the first time I addressed my portfolio to this meeting, the SNR. There was a input from many of my colleagues saying, "We want the data. We want the data. We must have the data to move forward." This is data fed. It's data rich, and we should be proud. We are proud of the work that Donna and has put into this for both councils, might I add. The other thing that I'm saying the obvious here, but what a wonderful presentation we're looking at here. The traffic lights immediately draw your eyes to what's on the right-hand column, and nearly every page gives you a green light and very few red lights. So again, that's going forward. That's a great accolade to this council. I will allude to your point, Chair, with regard. Why can't we do more on those crucial little grassroots interests from social media, etc.? Because on page 57, find it quickly. On page, come on. Yeah, on page 57, 7.3 is, again, it's an obvious thing that we look at in planning. Again, it's come up in many meetings I've been involved in. Lobbying government for improved building regs for energy efficiency, making renewable energy sources compulsory for new builds. It crops up all the time. Everyone wants it, but we know, well, I've made this mistake before. If Councillor Davis was here, he'd correct me, but nonetheless, we don't seem to have any control at all over building regs, and it's such a frustration because it's what we want as representatives of our community. Yes, our involvement with the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership is crucial. And I will say, I've got one more point, excuse me, Chair. Yeah, okay, that's, I wanted to refer to the.
If you come back to us if you want to.
By all means, but as I said, I proudly endorse this report.
Thank you.
From our sustainability officer.
Bring Donna back in, please.
I mean, it's a progress report. You've seen the actions before. You'll have seen some of the wording on the progress as well, because a lot of it's been taken from the reports that the PMO give to you. So it's trying not to duplicate effort and use the excellent PMO reports. I don't really have anything to say to it. You know, it's been looked at Climate Action Team 3 times now, and they're much ready to you for approval for publication. I'm happy to take any questions or comments, but otherwise, just like to get it on the website.
That's way to introduce the report. Thank you. Any questions and comments? Councillor Baxter.
I do have a question. Again, a benign question. I hope. I think I've made this question before, but this is 4.6, Donna, where it says an online climate change training module for members is available, and we have made carbon literacy training available to them. Yeah. Glad to see it.
There is an online
Yes.
climate change training module available.
Can you please push it out to all of us? Is that for officers and members?
It is, yeah. The website's just been revamped, hasn't it? So I'll have to check that it's definitely
Right,
made it on
yeah.
there. But
Well, that's
I'm
something I could
happy
do.
to.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. And the carbon literacy training was also made available. And I think you went on that.
I did. That's fine.
Yeah.
I agree with that one. Thanks, yeah. No.
Any particular questions on the report? Any comments? Vicky, do you want to remember what you're going to say, or are you okay?
I'm more than happy with this report, and I
Well,
like
we've
both
got-
approve adoption. Thank you.
Councillor Knight for moving the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Peter Lever. All those in favour? Thank you, John, thank you, Mark. Item 10. Council Marine Facilities.
Members. So members, this is a report around marine facilities. It's distinctly separate from Ilfracombe Harbour. You'll recall from those of you that have done the duty holder training for Ilfracombe Harbour, that obviously there are specific requirements for the harbour under the Port Marine Safety Code. In April of this year, the Port Marine Safety Code was released under a new name of Port and Marine Facility Safety Code, which now encaptures further marine facilities. So they're separate from the harbour and separate from the responsibilities of the harbour, but do fall under that new code. In terms of marine facilities for the council, the team have done some investigative works, and there are 3 assets within North Devon Council control that fall under marine facilities. These are namely Fremington Quay, Castle Quay, and also Roll Quay. The team have identified those under the code as full marine facilities, and there are therefore implications under the code in terms of management of those assets moving forwards. Just to make very clear, currently none of those assets generate an income for the council as a marine facility. So therefore there are decisions to make for this council in terms of whether they are retained as marine facilities ongoing under the code, and obviously the responsibilities that you as duty holder would then have in terms of ongoing reporting and obligations, or removing them as marine facilities. And obviously that again also has implications in terms of maybe current boats that are moored, etc., at some of those facilities. So in terms to give information to you in terms of where we are, a baseline audit was carried out on those 3 locations, and that's set out in Appendix A, which is on pages 71 to 93, in terms of compliance of those assets against the Port Marine and Facilities Code. In addition to that, a marine traffic usage survey was undertaken in terms of trying to identify how much marine traffic, if any, was actually defined at any of those assets. At Fremington Quay, there was no known usage of any marine vessel traffic. At Castle Quay, occasional small vessel usage, and at Roll Quay, no known usage. In terms of any associated costs to bring those facilities up to the code requirements, there are obviously some significant costs in terms of doing that. And also in terms of identifying which route you want to go, it's recommended in this report to have full structural surveys on those 3 assets in order to identify the current condition of them. Either route forward, there would be a cost in either case, because if we decide not to keep them as marine facilities, there's a cost in terms of removing and obviously making safe the existing assets. And there's a low expectation that any of those costs incurred could be recouped from anybody who's currently using them. In terms of additional responsibilities under the code, a slipway alone could also be classed as a marine facility. And we do have a number of slipways that have been identified under the ownership of the council. That includes areas at Hill Bay, Lee Bay, and Castle Quay, and also obviously those at the one at Roll Quay. In terms of ongoing obligations, there would be the requirement to appoint a designated person. You'll recall, those of you that have done the duty holder training, that I am the designated person for Ilfracombe Harbour under the Port Marine Safety Code. But if you wanted to retain these as marine facilities, you would need to appoint a designated person in terms of the responsibility for those marine assets as well. There would also need to be a nomination of a management department, such as our engineering department. Written procedures for maintenance, inclusive of cleaning schedules for those marine facilities, and also ensure they are fit for purpose with adequate lighting, life-saving equipment, and also have a good surface. There's also a duty for the council to report compliance 3-yearly to the Department of Transport, and also having annual internal audits carried out and a 3-yearly external audit. So quite a significant obligation on the council for facilities that aren't generating any sort of revenues to the authority. But obviously from a community perspective, obviously you may see that they have a wider community benefit. The options appraisal for those 3 assets have been set out in section 5 on pages 66 ongoing in your report, which sets out Fremington Quay, Roll Quay, and Castle Quay. You'll see on each of those, it sets out the level of vessel traffic, the current marine condition, and also the current marine risk, and also associated high-level estimated costs of either retaining them as a marine facility or removing them in terms of the associated works to have them removed as a marine facility. As you can see on Fremington Quay, the cost to remove the marine related infrastructure will be a cost of around £40,000, depending on the structural survey report, or to retain them a cost of around 300,000. So quite a significant difference in cost. Similarly, at Roll Quay, it sets out the level of vessel traffic, the associated costs of removing the infrastructure or retaining it as a marine facility, and similarly in Castle Quay in section 5.4. The conclusion from the officer team in terms of recommended route forwards was they concluded to remove all the marine related infrastructure and not have them as marine facilities under the code. But that's why the report is here for a steer from you as members today. In terms of doing nothing, there would obviously be non-compliance implications for the council if you decided we do nothing and we continue as we are. Under the Merchant Shipping Act, the maximum fine could be £250,000 per person and up to 5 years in prison if prosecuted under the unsafe operations, which essentially implications for ongoing management of the council. So the resource implications are set out in section 6, which again just summarise those, but obviously in terms of retaining all 3 facilities as a marine facility, you're looking at an investment of circa £500,000 to remove obviously a significant lower cost of around £75,000 for all 3 sites. They are high level estimates and that's why the recommendation sets out in section 2 sets out those costs, but also asks members to consider setting aside £10,000 per site to have a full structural survey carried out to better inform members moving forwards. If that report and the structural surveys came back significantly different to this report, then obviously a further report would come back to members to inform you of the way forwards.
Okay, John, this will be interesting now. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a bit of a concern here really because it's a distinct usage of slipways, difference to the slipways and the other marine facilities. And we have no mention so far of the use, particularly on Roll Quay and Castle Quay, by the gig club, by kayaks, by stand-up paddle boards, etc., that use these facilities. Fully understand the expense to meet compliance on the marine facilities, but I mean, I've talked with the harbour master of Ilfracombe, and she is clearly coming down in favour of keeping the slipways open and maintaining those. And okay, de-designate the rest, but it would be such a shame when we look at, you know, the impact the slipways have on. If in fact our dear Chief Executive is sitting on a slipway as we speak, ready to go into Ilfracombe Harbour, but you know, it has a massive impact on the well-being and on the health of the people that live there, and the financial gain as well could be looked at. But the gig club in Barnstable, a thriving and ever-improving facility, needs to have that ability to be able to access the water. So, I mean, there is one here, 2.4, which is a further report comes back. I wonder whether we could actually look at a little bit more detailed consultation onto who actually uses them. I agree with the Fremington. Fremington is, for me, is not used hardly at all. I can't see the need for that. But the 2 based in Barnstable certainly need to be looked at.
Legal point of view?
I just wanted to clarify a legal point. To be a marine facility, it has to be used by vessels. Kayaks and stand-up paddleboards are not vessels. The gig boats, they're not a vessel because they're not powered.
Gigs are, aren't they?
They don't have an engine, so they don't count to be a marine facility. Not that they're not slipways, but they're not a marine facility like they don't have the bits to be used by vessels. They're slipways.
Okay.
Different parts of the report.
There's a few councillors and I'll bring John back in after John. Okay. David Nye.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just, it's maybe a slightly dim-witted question, but when you deregulate something and it turns into a non-marine facility, what does the actual slipway look like? What, do we put a fence across it? Or, I mean, what's the actual function of being non?
No, the marine facilities we're looking at are Fremington.
Well, the roll key one, for instance, for
Not the roll key slip, the roll key.
I think just to be clear, the slipways could be classed as a marine facility if certain criteria met, i.e. if vessels were using slipways. But the report is recommending that the marine related infrastructure from Fremington and Castle Quay and Roll Quay, i.e. where boats are moored, would obviously be decommissioned. But the usage of the slipway would obviously continue. So slipways could fall under the code if obviously there was certain vessel traffic using slipways. But the recommendations are around removing the marine related infrastructure from those assets, not decommissioning the slipways, allowing the slipways to continue, albeit there could be under the code certain requirements around still needing a designated person, etc., and carrying out those maintenance procedures on slipways, but obviously less onerous than the other three assets that we've just touched on. So just to keep that clear, that slipways would be kept completely separate.
Just come back on that, because obviously when I looked at it and discussing it, I was a little bit confused on actually what actually is removed and what's not there, and how it was going to then be used. Because obviously, again, the public perception is obviously the word, it could be like, oh well, that's it, it's all going to be closed. You know, they always pick up on very simplistic terms that it's being removed. You know, and obviously we don't want to kind of confuse the public on exactly which bits are what and what bits covered.
That's where we, in sort of the section that sort of sets out each of the three assets with the images, it talks about that vessel traffic, permanently moored vessels. It's that infrastructure that is being talked about in terms of the marine element in terms of vessels.
Obviously,
not used
to buy boats up on whatever they're called. I'm not saying
moorings and mooring rings, etc., that have been
right.
So obviously, we're not currently managing those as a marine facility. If we wanted to keep those mooring rings and vessels operating there, at the moment, there's no legal relationship between us and the people who use them. They're being used in a sense historically. So that would need to be formalised moving forwards if you were going to maintain them as marine facilities. But there are no plans in a sense to close off slipways or things like that. Those slipways would continue. We would need to have a look at the operations of those to see whether any of those operations fell under the marine facility element. If they don't, they would continue as they currently do. If they did, we might just need to put some additional controls and procedures in place around those operations.
Councillor Crabb, and then Councillor Lever.
You've got a fair go at answering this. I'm gonna. So if I look at, I'm not overly familiar with roll key, but I mean, I imagine there are things like bollards, or I think, as you've mentioned, the rings. There would be other things. Is there not? And I mean, this is more for Barnstable people, I guess, but I mean, do they not feel affection? I mean, do those things not show that this is a key? You know, you wouldn't do it like this, but can you put a badge on it saying this is not a mooring thing? So the thing itself remains, but it's not. I was just thinking, like, if you rip all this stuff up, it's a car park. Do people in Barnstable, would they be happy with that?
At the end of the day, if there are vessels using that area and it's a council asset, then either we retain it, but we have to put the right procedures in place, or we remove it. There's no halfway house that says we're not taking any responsibility under the marine code.
No. I'm just talking about the actual physical, the physical assets. The ladders, I take it you want to get rid of because that shows a clear invitation to use them. But your infrastructure at the top, I don't know, that would be painted and make nice or something.
Yeah, I think anything related to the marine activity you would need to remove if you weren't going to have it as a marine facility. So
have you got a Facebook account? Have you got a Facebook account? I'm just wondering, if you are a Barnstable councillor, I would turn your internet off. That's all.
And that's really why it's coming for you consideration, because obviously there's an obligation and implication either way. There's a cost involved, but it's wider than just remove everything, because like you say, there are people who use it, there are benefits to people of Barnstable from those that use it, and that's why obviously it's come to members for decision as to moving forwards. I think the key activity is we need to have a structural survey to understand those figures a little bit more detail, And that needs to come back to members then to have a wider discussion about the future of road access.
Councillor Caroline Lever and then Councillor Frowns.
I wonder, and maybe you have mostly answered this question, but I wonder if you could set out in lay person's terms, what is marine infrastructure? You know, we are lay people as councillors, we're not experts, we're not technicians.
Presume you've done the training, Councillor Lever.
But I'm thinking in terms of, but I'm thinking in terms of clarity, for any members of the public who might be interested in the decisions that we're making, we need to be absolutely clear. What are we actually talking about in practical terms? And if it's ladders down the side of a quay, is that it? Is there other stuff? What is it we are actually talking about in layperson's terms?
There'll be things such as mooring rings. There'll be things that have been added to Roll Quay over the years, not necessarily by us.
Such as
Ladders, mooring rings, buoys, things that, because again, we've not operated it as a marine facility.
yeah.
Obviously, there's history associated with Roll Quay, and activity would have taken place years and years ago. But there are things that have been added to Roll Quay by people who have used them. We have no relationship with boat owners, for example, that we've got. So, for example, Ilfracombe Harbour, every boat owner who comes in and out of the harbour, there are procedures in place. We have legal arrangements in place. We have income that comes from those boat owners. There is no such arrangement, for example, at Roll Quay or even at Fremington Quay or Castle Quay. So that's why people have used it over the years for a significant period of time. But obviously the arrangements in place aren't formalised. So boating rings, buoys, ladders, etc., have been added for their usage, obviously by vessels, and therefore they are using those at the moment. There's not necessarily using them coming in and out of Roll Quay on a regular basis. They've been moored up for quite some significant period of time. We obviously need to formalise that if we're going to continue to use it as a marine facility under the code, and therefore we would need to make sure that they are proper mooring rings, proper associated ladders in place that are safe and used in the right procedures under the code, if you wanted to continue using it as a marine facility. So any infrastructure associated with them being able to keep their boats and vessels there that has either historically been there or have been put there by the boat owners themselves.
So what we're talking about is, sorry, forgive me, Chair, if it's okay. So what we're actually talking about is that we've not been operating it as a marine facility, but boat owners themselves have sort of turned it into an informal kind of marine facility where we possibly as a council have liabilities if there was damage or something, or and what we're talking about is removing those bits and pieces like buoys and rings and ladders and so on and so forth. So will that then mean that the boat owners who have 10 unauthorised vessels of varying lengths, that those will no longer be able to be on that bit of the at Roll Quay?
That's the decision that you need to make as to whether you want to continue the activity there, in which case, if you do, we need to put the proper procedures and infrastructure in place. Or if you decide you don't want to, then obviously, yes, the outcome from that would be that all of that infrastructure would need to be removed. That would obviously impact the current unauthorised people who are using Roll Quay, even if we as a council have accepted that as a practice for a long period of time.
And so have conversations been sought with those boat owners? It seems to me that that's a pretty important thing for us to do.
It's part of this process was to identify what the current position was, which is why we've got this baseline position that's come to you today. Obviously, we need to carry out further work in terms of getting the structural assessment of the assets themselves to better inform the associated costs, and obviously then understand what those implications would be in terms of current occupiers who are there. And obviously then the impact that would have if you as members decided you wanted to remove them as a marine facility, what implication would that have on the people who currently operate there? And obviously that would need to come back to you to fully understand that, to make an informed decision as to whether there's any alternative provision for them, or where that alternative provision may or may not be.
And it may be that there are people actually living on some of those vessels. Perhaps.
Councillor Bowers and Councillor Petrinus and Councillor Eva now, I think we'll better start making.
Chair, without
Decision.
without forcing people to yawn, I mean, Barnstable's history is about its story of being the second most important port on the west coast after Bristol in the 16th, 17th centuries. I mean, Ricky will tell you, when we were kids, I mean, the sound used to come to Castle Quay and it was loaded off. Yeah. I mean, so, yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, it's a bit nostalgic to say, you know, what we're really saying here is that Barnstaple is no longer a port, and we're not going to, it never will be again. Not very long ago, the Oldenburg used to come to Barnstaple and take people on trips out to Lundy and things. I mean, I know that it's silted up a bit since probably. But the county council too got a lot of funding from Sustrans for the bridge to swing to get in and out of the River Yo. So there's so much more involved in this than just saying, you know, we're going to just change the name of what we do because it saves us money. That sounds a bit of a criticism. But, I mean, the other thing, and again, SJ will yawn for sure. My grandfather was the last harbour master of Barnstaple when it had its own harbour master. And at the time, I mean, it's not relevant really, but the river, the Roll Quay, there was a really bad accident there where somebody was killed, and they smashed the quay, and there was a Board of Trade and Admiralty inquiry and all sorts of things, because it used to be really, really busy. And I think that's why the county still kept the swing bridge, because up until certainly in my memory, boats used to come in and out of the River Yo, quite substantial ones. So we got to decide whether in the future we're never going to need these facilities. I remember back in the early days in the 90s when we were doing the Strand improvements, we thought about taking out the quay, the Great Quay. The only reason we didn't do it, or it was unviable, was because we couldn't get the gas board to agree to move the main, because it runs right through the Great Quay. But what we're really doing is saying none of those things will ever happen, and a replica sailing ship could never tie up again in Barnstaple. So I'm picking up what Caroline Lewis said. I think we need to go and talk to the town council and to the community of Barnstaple about this before we make a final decision. Yeah. And I say, you know, it may be nostalgia, and it certainly makes sense in terms of the corporate responsibility we have. So not a criticism of the report, but I think we just need to tread carefully and go and speak to the community and try and see if we can get it right. So I would probably, if you could, I just move that we defer this to do those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, far from boring, Councillor Prowse. I find your history, grandfather's history there, fascinating. Bring the legal team.
If I can clarify, Chair, this is a report asking to spend £10,000 on each of the facilities identified to investigate these very points. Not, it's which ones do you want to spend £10,000 on investigating, not which ones do you want to shut. That will come back in a further report.
I think a couple of things. You know, one is I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, it would, you know, once Barnstaple goes as a port, it's gone, and I think it's a decision that we shouldn't take lightly. Couple of things. Could we be clear in this that if we approve this, what we're doing is exactly as you said, approving spending some money, looking at viability, and that we're not talking about taking a decision certainly to close the marine facilities, the 2 marine facilities in Barnstaple. Could we also be absolutely clear? Because you know, I hope, like everybody else here, I've recently redone the harbour training, and reading this, it is not at all clear to me whether the slipways are included in this or not. And I think that, you know, if this, you know, this is in the public domain, we need to be really clear that what the sort of uses that we're talking about here. If we're not talking about stopping the slipways being used by paddle boarders and the gig clubs, then I think we just need to be very, very clear about that. And the second thing is, in making this recommendation, can we make it clear that this is to involve consultation with existing water users? So we do need to talk to them, although, you know, I understand they're not powered boats, but I think In terms of the way that this is perceived by people in Barnstaple, we do need to talk to the gig clubs and to people who are using unpowered craft from these slipways as well. And also, I think we, the other council leaders, right? I mean, there may well be people living on those boats, and are we looking at evicting them or just taking away the facilities that enable them to tie up? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's just not very clear here in terms of what happens to people who are using those facilities at the moment. And we do need to consult with them, and we do need to look at the whole implications, including ones about potentially evicting people who live on the river in boats.
Councillor Victorinos, and then last one from Councillor Crower.
I think I got confused in the report because of the recommendations. I mean, the recommendations, as far as I can see, really is 2.3. So you spend 10 grand on each facility to make sure what the decision ought to be.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy with that. I mean, because it seems premature until we do that to take any decision, because we don't know how much money we're going to spend on it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Chair, thank you, Speaker. So 2.3 is asking members to spend £10,000 per site to have full structural surveys carried out on those 3 assets to better inform, obviously, the information that was in the report. Obviously, the first parts of the recommendation were talking about the options, and obviously the options of either removing or retaining them. Obviously, 2.2 set out on the basis of that information the preferred option, but again, from what I'm hearing is you need more information in terms of the current use of those assets, the implications on those users, and whether there are any alternative options if you chose to close those marine facilities.
Sorry, but I misunderstood. Isn't that what the recommendations say? They say, they say here's some options, but we're going to need to spend some money to find out which one to do.
2.3 is saying that in order to go away, spend the money, come back, then once we've got that fuller information. And 2.4 is then obviously bringing back a further report. I think the only thing I would change, obviously, on 2.4, it talks about only coming back with a further report if it materially changes the advice given in the report. I would probably just remove that, because obviously you want further information in terms of the current uses of the slipways, current information on the current people who use the boats at Rollkey. So what I would recommend is that your recommendation 2.3 is in order to remove the bit that says in order to confirm the preferred option, because at this stage you don't know that. It's just to say that the committee recommend revenue budget allocation of £30,000, £10,000 per site to be funded from strategic contingency reserve for the full structural surveys of each key. And then 2.4, a further report be brought back to strategy and resources following the completion of the surveys and existing uses of the assets in order to fully inform the decision moving forwards. So you only have those 2 recommendations. You don't have 2.1 and 2.2 at this stage until such time as you have those reports coming back to you for further steps.
Yeah, I'm reasonably happy with that. Yeah, I was just getting the other thing. I know what you said there about as a result of conversations. At no point did you mention about having the conversation. So tweak those words so that actually we're obligated to consult with users or consult with the wider community, perhaps. I don't know.
The problem is in the report itself, it's got recommendation to close them.
Exactly that.
Which is
John struck 2.1
yeah.
and 2.2. He struck them.
Yeah.
So if we get rid of the recommendations 2.1, 2.2,
And then 2.3.
and then have 2.3 and including 2.3, some kind of consultation exercise with present users. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yes. John, can we use 2.3 and include something about consultation?
Yes, so 2.3 obviously is the spending of the money on the external structural surveys, and obviously we would then obviously need to carry out then public consultation, which we would do through our engagement software that we have here.
Right. Councillor Caroline Lever.
I was going to suggest that in terms of consultation with boat owners, I mean, it may be that it's difficult to find out who those boat owners are. It may be that there are some people living on those boats. Putting something out on the website, using a have your say kind of approach ain't going to do this. It needs to be people actually going down there to talk to people.
Grandfather back, shall I?
Yeah.
Relatives.
obviously we can do a public consultation exercise through our normal public consultation routes. Obviously, where there are organisations that are potentially directly involved, such as gig clubs, etc., users of slipway,
They know more.
and also associated. I mean, we don't necessarily know the owners of the boats because obviously that in a sense we haven't got those legal arrangements with them currently, but we will try and engage as best we can with the people who currently use those assets to inform them of the public consultation that's there and also try and have that dialogue with them directly.
Councillor Ricky, is it to do with this?
Yes, it is. It's been an intriguing evolving of this discussion. This is perennially on the agenda for the Torrens Estuary Forum, and they always make the comment that Turridge has a harbour master, and Bideford has a harbour master, and you've regenerated, Malcolm, my interest in Barnstaple Town Council have discussed this as well at length with regard to liverboards, etc. But Barnstaple could do with a harbour master. Yes, but I mean to deal with the estuary, and in many respects, we're talking about having.
Are you volunteering to do this in a voluntary position?
No.
You get your uniform.
Get your grandpa back. It was a serious suggestion.
Yes. Okay, we'll perhaps come back to that.
Okay.
If I can just answer that point. So obviously, if you do decide to retain our marine facilities, in a sense, you will have a designated person, in a sense, who will be responsible as part of duty holder, as part of you as full council for the responsibility of those assets, i.e. in Barnstaple, if you retained Roll Key as a marine facility. So again, there would be a wider responsibility and management in place. Wouldn't be a harbour master, because obviously Barnstaple isn't a harbour. We have a harbour master at Ilfracombe, but obviously Barnstaple would fall under the marine facilities, as we've just been doing this report.
His office was in the Queen Anne building. It's right up. Where the tombstone is.
We need to move a recommendation 2.3.
I'm happy. No, it's changed. I think that's really.
Can we just clarify? John, can you just clarify exactly what we're voting for?
Yeah, so what you're recommending is 2.3. So scrubbing out the words that say in order to confirm the third option, what you're saying is that this committee recommend revenue budget allocation of £30,000, £10,000 per site to be funded for the strategic contingency reserve, full structural surveys of each key, and to carry out consultation with public consultation in order to inform a further report that will come back to this committee for further discussion and position moving forwards.
That's been moved by Councillor Prowse, seconded by Councillor Crabb. All those in favour of that recommendation? Thank you. Thank you, John. Item 11 is the work programme. I think we've just gone item 11, and we've got one recommendation that we had.
So item 11, Chair, is your work programme that sets out those items that we previously discussed around items coming to your next meetings on October onwards. The additional item this morning was a update report back on the item increasing solar generation on council-owned properties to come to a meeting prior to the end of 2025. So I would recommend your 1st of December to 2025 meeting. Currently, you've got no item scheduled for that meeting. So yeah, if you're happy, Chair, and members are happy to bring that update report to that meeting.
Yeah.
Should the work programme also include a feedback on the consultation on the marine facilities?
What we'll have to do, Chair, is obviously because there's two outcomes from that. Obviously, there's the commissioning of the full structural surveys on those three assets. At the moment, we haven't got a timeline in terms of how long that's likely to take. Yeah. We would then need to build a timeline in for public consultation and engagement with the users. Yeah. So if you're happy, Chair, we'll go away and carry out those two pieces of work, understand what the timeline is, and then at your next meeting, we'll be able to feed that into the work programme as to which meeting that would come to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other recommendations to go into the work programme? Anybody? Yeah, and a reminder to those online as well. Has anybody got any recommendations? I think come before SNR. Let Ken, John, or myself know, and we can put it on the agenda in future meetings. Otherwise, can we note that and move on to item 12, which is exclusion of public and press and restricted documents. Can we move that recommendation? Moved, seconded. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. So we're going to go into a private session.
Still recording therefore.